the best ever NBA teams to never win a championship in the 2000s. Now, before I get started, if you guys would want to see the best NBA teams to never win a championship in the 1990s, then drop a like on this video and comment down below letting me know. And that would be really interesting because that's at the time where there was Michael Jordan playing. So yeah, there were some pretty good teams that never were able to win a championship. But anyway, these are the 2000s. Let's get into it. Number 1, the 2012-13 Oklahoma City Thunder. They finished with a record of 60-22, and they actually got eliminated in the Western Conference semifinals. The year before, the Thunder made it to the NBA Finals, only to be matched up against the Miami Heat. In the 2012 NBA Finals up against the Heat, the Thunder won the first game at home, but then lost 4 in a row and ended up losing the series in 5 games. After the finals, they went into the offseason and lost future MVP candidate James Harden. Even after losing James Harden in a surprise offseason sign and trade, the Thunder came back better statistically the following year, taking over as the top-rated offensive team and finishing 4th on the defensive end. They didn't just lead the league in margin of victory, they finished at 9.21 points per game, 1.34 points ahead of the number 2 spot on the list, the Heat. But a knee injury to Russell Westbrook in the opening round of the playoffs proved too much to overcome in what was a well-stocked Western Conference, and the Thunder were taken out in just 5 games by the Memphis Grizzlies. Pretty disappointing for the Thunder, and I honestly think that if James Harden would have stayed in the Oklahoma City Thunder, imagine that big three playing today. So, do you think if James Harden was still on the Oklahoma City Thunder this year, they could have advanced on to the NBA Finals and actually beat the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals to face up against the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA Finals? Comment down below and let me know. Honestly, if the Thunder have James Harden this year, I don't know how they might have gone, but that's pretty scary. Number 2, the 2010-11 Miami Heat. They finished with a record of 58-24 and were eliminated in the NBA Finals. This was one of the biggest media teams in all of NBA history, with LeBron James, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh coming together that season. People from the public and the media were predicting 75 wins and 8 championships to come. Of course, it wasn't that easy. After a shaky start to the season, the Miami Heat finally regained power after a talk between Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh and LeBron. They ended up playing really well for the rest of the season. The Heat pulled together in the East playoffs with a 12-3 record and got up on the Mavericks 2-1 in the NBA Finals. But Dallas rallied for 3 straight wins, sending LeBron James to his lowest point of his career. He played absolutely terrible that NBA Finals and was scrutinized for it. He had already had some disappointing times in Cleveland, and now he was losing in Miami too? Luckily for him and the Miami Heat, the Heat managed to step it up and win a few championships after. But that series being up 2-1 against the Dallas Mavericks and then losing, that was actually a pretty good team and they couldn't get it done. Number 3, the 2015-16 San Antonio Spurs. They finished with a record of 67-15 and they were actually eliminated in the second round of this year's playoffs. Yeah, you heard me right. This year's San Antonio Spurs. The defining traits of these Spurs: historically dominant defense and a full season in the shadows of an even greater team. Yeah, the 2015-16 Warriors will arguably be one of the best teams of all time, if not the best team of all time, comparing him to Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls. And some may say that the Warriors are the greatest team in NBA history, but the Spurs' simple rating system number was barely any worse, at 10.38 for Golden State to 10.38 for San Antonio. And as we all know, everyone thought that this year's Western Conference Finals had a chance to be even better than the NBA Finals, with the San Antonio Spurs facing up against the Golden State Warriors. Throughout the regular season, they had some very intense matchups. What was pretty disappointing for San Antonio is that they got kicked out in the second round up against the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that they probably should have been. And it all came after an off-season of landing LaMarcus Aldridge and David West while locking up Kawhi Leonard and of course Danny Green to long-term deals. The Spurs will be back of course, but this may have been the best team in their franchise history. And to lose like they did to a Thunder team this year was a huge disappointment, especially considering the record they obtained this season. I'd classify them as one of the best NBA teams to never win a championship, but they can prove me wrong next season. The thing is though, I don't know if Duncan or Ginobili will be back, and if they don't come back, then it's definitely one of the best teams to never win a championship, considering the amazing record that they've had. Number 4, the 2001-02 Sacramento Kings. They finished with a record of 61-21 and were eliminated in the Western Conference Finals. These Kings were an amazing team back with their big three of Chris Webber, Vlade Divac and Mike Bibby, backed up by their defensive ace of Doug Christing and a young Hedo Turkoglu, along with six-man Bobby Jackson. They also had the Lakers on ropes with a trip to the NBA Finals at stake in the conference finals, but Robert Horry's clutch three-pointer in Game 4 cost the Kings a commanding 3-1 series lead, and with crazy lopsided refereeing in Game 6, the Lakers went on to the free throw line an absurd 27 times in just the fourth quarter, regarded as one of the greatest playoff matchups in history. In a controversial series, the Kings lost in 7 games, one game away from what would have been the first NBA Finals and professional sports championships in Sacramento's history. This was a crushing blow to the Kings. After losing to their arch rivals in a highly controversial series, the team would begin to decline in age in the years followed. Many commentators and journalists would question the decisions made by the referees in Game 6, specifically that the Lakers were awarded 27 free throws in just the fourth quarter, many of which came from what were in retrospect proved to be no calls by the Kings. The Sacramento Kings, in other words, were probably the better team that year, but were denied a title by the whistles and bum luck and probably a little bit of David Stern. Number 5. The 2008-09 Cleveland Cavaliers. They finished with a record of 66-16 and they were eliminated in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Cavaliers had rolled through the NBA that season behind the MVP of the league, LeBron James, and had the best supporting cast James would ever get in his first stint with Cleveland. As we all know, LeBron never really had the best teammates around him in Cleveland, clearly shown by the time he led them to the 2007 NBA Finals and literally had no one. But now he had at least some decently good teammates with him, and I definitely emphasize decently. With Zydrunas Ilgauskas pulling together his last good season, Ben Wallace eventually giving way to Anderson Varejao at power forward, and 5 players shooting better than 38% from the three-point line: Mo Williams, Wally Szczerbiak, Delonte West, and Boobie Gibson. The Cavs began a 2009 postseason by sweeping the 8-seeded Detroit Pistons, winning every game by 10 or more points. In the conference semifinals, the Cavaliers swept the 4-seeded Atlanta Hawks, again winning in each game by at least 10 points, becoming the first team in NBA history to win 8 straight playoff games by a double-digit margin. The Cavs then met the Orlando Magic in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Cavs lost in Game 1 of the series 107-106, only lost by 1 point at home despite James' 49-point effort. Despite winning Game 2 by a score of 96-95, another 1-point margin, with the help of King James hitting a buzzer-beating three-pointer, it was not enough as Orlando won the series in 6 games. But the Cavs flamed out the Orlando Magic in the conference finals and would do the same against the Celtics in the following year. These flops left the organization in disarray and would actually lead LeBron James out of the town in the summer of 2010, as we all know, joining Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami. Number 6. The 2003-04 Los Angeles Lakers. They finished with a record of 56-26 and they were eliminated in the NBA Finals. Statistically, this was not an off-the-charts NBA team. They finished with 56 wins, which ranked 4th in that NBA season, and they were only slightly better than the average in most areas except one: name recognition. These were the Lakers not only of Kobe Bryant, Shaq O'Neal, but of Gary Payton and Karl Malone too. Before the season, the Los Angeles Lakers signed 2-time MVP Karl Malone, formerly off the Utah Jazz, and former Seattle Supersonics Defensive Player of the Year and probably the greatest defensive point guard of all time, Gary Payton. So the Lakers were looking to have a huge season that year, and I mean, the whole media was behind them. They had a big four. Now, 3 of the big 4, however, struggled with injuries. Shaq suffered from a strained calf, Malone had an injured knee, and Kobe Bryant had an injured shoulder. The Lakers started 18-3 and finished with a record of 56-26. They won the Pacific Division title and entered the playoffs as the number 2 seed. They defeated the Rockets, Spurs, and Timberwolves in the first 3 rounds of the 2004 NBA playoffs before losing to a Detroit Pistons team in 5 games in the 2004 NBA Finals. Now, this was a team that marked the rebirth of a super team notion in the salary cap era, which wasn't as common during that era. But it was mostly a disaster, as Malone was 40 years old and Gary Payton was 35, and the Lakers just had trouble staying healthy. As a result, Shaq left to join the Miami Heat and ended up winning a championship with Dwayne Wade. Number 7. The 2005-06 Dallas Mavericks. In the NBA Finals, the Dallas Mavericks faced up against the Miami Heat and held home court advantage and scored 2 convincing wins. After Game 2, Dallas City officials had already planned the victory parade. They were getting ready to drop the balloons as soon as Game 4 was over, expecting a sweep. However, in Game 3, the Mavs blew a late double-digit lead, courtesy of one of the greatest shooting guards of all time in my opinion, Dwayne Wade. He carried the Heat to victory, with Nowitzki missing potentially a game-tying free throw in the last seconds of Game 3. After getting blown out in Game 4, the Mavericks suffered another loss in Game 5, when Dwayne Wade scored the game-tying basket in the last possession of regular time, putting the Miami Heat ahead with last-second free throws in overtime. The tragic figure was that Josh Howard, who missed a pair of clutch free throws in overtime and mistakenly called an early timeout, so the Mavs had to bring the ball in the backcourt rather than in the half-court for the last possession. In Game 6, the Mavericks took an early double-digit lead, but again, Dwayne Wade poured in 36 points, helped by Alonzo Mourning's 5 blocks, and the Mavericks lost their 4th game and the title after a string of blotched 3-pointers. The Mavericks became only the 3rd team in NBA history to lose in the finals after taking a 2-0 lead. In Game 3, the Mavs held a 13-point lead with under 7 minutes remaining, but were outscored 22-7, courtesy of Dwayne Wade, in the momentum-changing 98-96 defeat. The Heat's performance in the last 7 minutes represented by the team's greatest postseason comeback in NBA history, and as a Heat fan, I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed this championship, and this is why I respect Dwayne Wade so much. He did this in his 3rd year in the league. After being drafted in 2003, getting the Miami Heat to victory and winning a championship in 2006 was possibly one of the greatest finals performances ever. Maybe I'm just a little bit biased as a Heat fan. Anyway, those are just a few teams that I thought of. If you guys have any other teams that you think have had great success but were never able to win a championship, comment them down below. If you're new around here, I make a whole bunch of NBA videos, what ifs, as well as 2K content, so be sure to subscribe for more. If you enjoyed this video, let's see if we can reach 2,000 likes for the next one, and comment down below if you guys would like to see another era, like the best teams to never win a championship in the 1990s, which will be pretty interesting since Jordan was playing at that time and there were some pretty great teams, but were never able to win a championship. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. I'm out. Peace.